What is all the drama around the Passion Translation? Today we will be covering why it is now facing accusations of plagiarism of all things. Now you may be wondering what even is this Bible version. In short, the Passion Translation came out with its first edition in 2017, claiming to be a translation when it functions as a paraphrase. It insists on being called a translation, since it claims it unearths spiritual truths from the original languages by the help of God, ones that every other translation missed. These problematic factors eventually got it removed from BibleGateway.com, the top Bible website, and it's gotten into some hot water as of this year. A channel by the name of The Minor Prophets did an expose on how they studied several passages in the Passion Translation that seem to have been plagiarized from other paraphrased Bible versions. Link to this video will be found in the description. The prime suspects are the NLT, the New Living Translation, the TLB, the Living Bible, the MSG, the Message Bible, and the Aramaic New Testament of Victor Alexander. For simplicity, we will refer to it just as Victor. Other suspects include the AMPC, David Boucher's original Aramaic New Testament, Andrew Roth's Aramaic English New Testament, and even the Mirror Bible. However, we will keep ourselves to the prime suspects for this study. What I want to make clear is that Bibles copying other Bibles isn't actually too uncommon, and that it is a good thing. The King James Bible was a modified copy of the Bishop's Bible that came before it, and several other modern translations today were actually based on the KJV. However, giving proper credit where credit is due is necessary, and the Passion Translation did no such thing. Still, this version is different in another way, and that is how no verse is completely copied from any other translation. Each verse is unique, but not all of them are 100% original. So the claim is not that the Passion Translation was based on another Bible that came before it, but what is being talked about is how it potentially stole phrases and terms that are uniquely and exclusively found in the prime suspects we listed earlier, merging them into its own new phrases in the same verses that they were originally taken from. Now, is that such a bad thing? It's not like the Bible is an original work. It's ultimately a translation. So naturally, every Bible will end up overlapping in their phrasings in some way. However, there are two issues people have been pointing out specifically with the Passion Translation. Number one, the phrases are not indicative of the Greek, but resemble the paraphrased words found from other paraphrased Bibles. And number two, this happens immensely often. A few verses here and there paying homage to other Bibles would not be all too bad. But what becomes an issue is the frequency of how often it happens. Although the Minor Prophets performed their own study, I thought I would perform my own as well. I did some data scraping on the first edition of the Passion Translation and also the prime suspects, and the results were absolutely shocking. It will take me a long time to work through all of this data, but I will share a bit of what I have so far. So of my personally collected data, about 31% of the similarities were from the NLT, about 19% were from the TLB, about 15% were from both the TLB and the NLT, about 20% were from the Message Bible, and about 12% was from the translation of Victor Alexander. These statistics will be overlooking the other suspects I mentioned earlier. Now, these were just the total of my findings. If you want to see the findings of the Minor Prophets, you can click a link in the description to see their full video. And in their description, they provide a download to their research documents. I highly recommend it. However, if you want to see what instances I found that are not in their findings, then you can take a look for yourself. To start us off, we will go to the NLT. We just talked about this translation not long ago, and overall, it had the most similarities found in the TPT, or the Passion Translation. The NLT is technically a thought for thought, but it has some paraphrase elements left in it, which seems to make it a favorite of the Passion Translation. So I studied Matthew the most while performing my Matthew test, and in the Passion Translation, if we were to go to Matthew 5:18, it reads, "Not even the smallest detail of the law will be done away with." There are only two other common translations that have this phrasing. That's going to be the GNT and also the NLT. Now, one similarity is nothing to draw conclusions on, but this becomes a trend as you'll start to see. In Matthew 16:19, it uses the phrasing of forbid on earth that which is forbidden in heaven. This is the same in the NLT. To forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven. It even shows up again in Matthew 18:18. Forbid on earth will be considered to be forbidden in heaven, and also forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven. Now, it is odd phrasing to say something will be forbidden in heaven or considered to be forbidden in heaven, and that's what made this passage particularly odd, and as we can see, they're similar in this way. Now on to some more prominent ones. In Matthew 21:9, the Passion Translation says, Jesus rode in the center of the procession. There are no other common translations with this phrasing except for the NLT. Jesus was in the center of the procession. This kind of exact phrasing can be found again in Matthew 25:9. They replied, "We don't have enough for all of us," and no other translation we can find has this same phrasing except the NLT. We don't have enough for all of us. Now, going to the TLB, the Living Bible, it was actually the original that the NLT was based on when they made it. This makes them both similar to each other, but there are distinctive differences between these Bibles that they don't share. Many of their distinctive elements are actually found in the TPT. For example, Matthew 11:3 reads, "Are you really the one?" No other Bible we can find commonly has this phrasing, but the TLB. Are you really the one? In Matthew 27:23, it phrases it as, what has he done wrong? There is a small batch of Bible translations that instead say, why, what has he done wrong? But to put the why at the beginning of the verse and what has he done wrong later is something that the TLB and very few others have, making this particular phrasing of it indicative of this version and very few others. At the beginning of Luke, the Passion Translation says, have already been written, using as their source material, and this exact phrasing is found in the Living Bible and no other Bibles. Have already been written, using as their source material. Going a little further, we see the phrase, you will be stricken silent and unable to speak. This matches almost exactly to the TLB. You are to be stricken silent, unable to speak, and no other Bible resembles this remotely. 2 Corinthians 3:18 says, we all become like mirrors who brightly reflect the glory of the Lord Jesus. Now, very few Bibles use the term mirrors in this passage, but only the TLB uses the phrase brightly reflect, as it goes on to use this same phrase. We can be mirrors that brightly reflect the glory of the Lord. However, because the NLT is based on the TLB, there are many elements they still share that were also mimicked in the Passion Translation. Matthew 1:19 reads, he secretly planned to break the engagement. This is a rather rare way of phrasing this. Only a select few Bibles will put it this way, and two of which are the NLT and the TLB. Matthew 11:22 says, we'll be better off on judgment day than you. Here, the Passion Translation mimics very closely the TLB when it says, we'll be better off on the judgment day than you, and also the NLT, will be better off on judgment day than you. Only about 3 common Bibles have this phrasing, and 2 of which are the TLB and the NLT. Matthew 17:25 says, before he had a chance to speak. Only 3 Bibles in total have this phrasing, 2 of which are the TLB, before he had a chance to speak, and also the NLT, before he had a chance to speak. Now, when we go to Luke 3:9, the Passion Translation says, God's axe of judgment is poised. These terms of judgment is poised is only found in the NLT and the TLB, when they say axe of his judgment is poised and axe of God's judgment is poised. So very distinctive language and terms specifically only those 2 Bibles have that conveniently the Passion Translation now also shares. Going to 2 Corinthians 6:15, the Passion Translation says, what harmony can there be between Christ and Satan? This particular kind of phrasing can be found found in the TLB, what harmony can there be between Christ and the devil, and the NLT, what harmony can there be between Christ and the devil. This may seem simple, but this specific phrasing is only found in 4 common Bibles: the NLT, the TLB, the AMP, and the AMPC. All of these are suspects that are brought up as potentially influencing the Passion Translation. But we cannot forget that another one of those are going to be the Message Bible. For those unfamiliar, the Message Bible is probably the most classic paraphrase that exists. Its language choices are unique, to say the least, but that means that similarities with the TPT are the most recognizable, because the Message Bible is likely the most distinctive version out there, and you will see what that means. Matthew 21:12 reads, "Into a hangout for thieves." There is only one Bible that has this phrase, and it is the Message Bible, a hangout for thieves. Mark 5:9 lists the demon named Legion, but in the Passion Translation, his name is Mob, which coincidentally only 2 other Bibles share this phrasing, which is the Message and also the GNT. So again, this distinctive language is carried over. Going back to the beginning of Luke, it ends with this phrase, "Beyond any shadow of a doubt, the reliability of all you have been taught." This is almost word for word how the Message ends this passage. Beyond the shadow of a doubt, the reliability of what you were taught. And again, only the Message has this kind of phrasing. Going to John 6:6, it has this phrase of "to stretch Philip's faith," which is a very odd word choice, and it's also found in the Message Bible and no others. To stretch Philip's faith. Romans 9:20 says, "Who do you think you are to second guess God?" This is indicative of how the Message puts it when it says, "Who in the world do you think you are to second guess God?" No other Bible has this second guessing language other than the Message Bible. In 1 Corinthians 1:4, it says free and open access, which is a phrase only the Message has, free and open access. In 2 Corinthians 1:17, it says ready to flip-flop, which again is very hilarious to put in a Bible, but we can see that the Message did it first to accuse me of flip-flopping. No other Bible has this, but the Message alone. 2 Corinthians 10:2 says, "Don't force me to take a hard line with you," to which only the Message has this phrasing. Don't force me to take a hard line when I'm present with you. 2 Corinthians 12:17 says, "Did I somehow cheat or trick you?" which can only be found in the Message. Did I cheat or trick you? And also we have Hebrews 7:26, the high priest who perfectly fits our need. The AMP and the AMPC would say perfectly adapted, and even in brackets, so that wouldn't be a perfect fit, but only the Message has this exact kind of phrasing, a high priest who perfectly fits our needs. Now, the most complicated case comes to the Passion Translation's claims about how it uses the Aramaic texts, which means it goes by the philosophy and view of Aramaic primacy, the belief that the whole New Testament was originally written in Aramaic, and the Greek was only translated later from it. Very few scholars hold to this position, with the hypermajority holding to Greek primacy. Among a handful of Bibles, there is the Aramaic New Testament of Victor Alexander, where apparently he claims to have received special Aramaic manuscripts, ones that distinctively differ from the Aramaic Peshitta translation, and he translated his Bible from those. So this means that the Passion has several portions that are distinctly different from how Greek translations would render them, but this is defended by saying that these portions are from the Aramaic manuscripts, which are the true originals. So as odd as the claim of Aramaic primacy is, this isn't where the controversy ends. Instead of only claiming to be based on the Aramaic, the Passion Translation actually seems to have copied from other English translations that worked with the Aramaic, and the similarities between the Passion and Victor's work seem to show this. And this is because Victor's translation has word usages that absolutely no other translation holds to. This makes it very easy to point out the similarities between them and how this definitely seems to be intentional. In the Passion Translation in Matthew 27:59, it reads, "Shroud of fine linen." No common translation has this, only Victor has it. Shroud of fine linen. In Acts 26:2, it reads, I consider myself highly favored. This language of highly favored is not found in other translations, only the Victor. I consider myself highly favored. What is really interesting is the passage of Ephesians 5:23. The Minor Prophets podcast actually pointed out how most of this verse is actually resembling to the Message Bible. However, the very end of this verse, where it says reviver of the body, actually only resembles Victor's translation, reviver of the body. So the Minor Prophets pointed out how most of this is the Message Bible, but it's actually a combination of the Message Bible with the Victor translation. Going on to Ephesians 6:11, it says strategies of the accuser. Now, about 7 different Bibles use the term strategies, including the NLT, but none of them have the word accuser. This is only going to be found with the Victor. Now, this is most likely indicative of how Satan means accuser. However, this means the TPT has a similarity that only the Victor has. I noticed there was a trend in some of these epistles with the term life giver. This is going to be in 1 Timothy 4:10, 2 Timothy 1:10, and Titus 3:6. Now, taking from the Greek, all of these passages should actually say Savior. However, there is no version that has life giver here except also for Victor. So again, this is very distinctive language exclusive to this translation, also appearing in the Passion. And when we get to Jude 8, it has the phrase, these sensual dreamers, which is very odd phrasing, but the term dreamers is actually common. It's in about 27 Bibles, but none have sensual. Only Victor has these sensual dreamers. So again, these two exclusively copy each other in this way. To be clear, translations are expected to be similar since they all work with the same source. However, if a translation is not faithful to the original in countless ways, and those exact word choices match those of other interpretive paraphrase versions, this is what would end up as causing many to become suspicious of that version. Before having an opinion on my own on this whole controversy, I wanted to see for myself exactly how much evidence there was for it. And I can assure you that the similarities we are talking about are far more than just a few passages, and a ton more than even what we went over today. I would recommend for all of you to check out the expose from the Minor Prophets. Their research document has even more details than what was shown here, and it even shows the updates with the second edition of the translation. But hopefully this research was able to show you a bit of what everyone seems to be so concerned about. If you want more Bible translation studies, be sure to like and subscribe and stay tuned for our future videos. But until next time, thank you all for watching.